Welcome to Speak, a platform where artisans get to talk candidly about their work in the arts and also weigh in on some of the creative industry's biggest issues today. My name is Jennifer DiMarco. I'm a filmmaker, poet, playwright, screenwriter, filmmaker, core mechanic designer for games, and a musician. Today I am speaking with J.W. Capek and J.L. Snyder, who are the incredible writing team behind the Dearware Codex. Now, first, of course, thank you for joining us on Speak, Jim and Janice.
Mm-hmm.
I do kind of feel like that's slightly misleading, though, for me to introduce you guys as the writing team behind, because Dearware Codex has 3 books. Jim, you are a writer on the 3rd book with Janice.
Yes.
But, Jim, were you involved in the process prior?
I was involved in a great deal of research for the previous books, particularly regarding the quantum computer that plays a big part in this.
Yeah.
It's actually a living character for a while. Then it's 2 later on in the story. But yeah, I did a lot of research, everything from how they work, when they got started. It actually began back in the early 60s. There was a man from Holland. His name was Nicholas, let me see if I can say this right, Bloembergen.
Okay.
Nicholas Bloembergen. He was a Nobel laureate. And he came up with the idea of how to make an intelligent computer. And basically it was how to manipulate atoms. And he came up with the idea that they could manipulate atoms with an electrical current. And it performed way beyond their expectations. And that's what I spent my time doing, was researching these computers. I know the first one was turned on in 1980, which Janice wrote the original book, the Dearware Awakening, before.
Right.
And
yeah, considerably before.
Actually, she tried to publish it in 1978,
right,
which was 2 years before quantum computers existed, or before they were actually turned on at any
realized,
time.
Yeah.
And so it was 2 years before that. So the computer in the original book was not sentient like this one is. And this guy thinks, and I say guy because he considers himself masculine. And that is part of the story later in the series,
yeah,
where actually after a revolution, the computer's not used near as much, and so he bisects himself and creates another living being. We'll get into that in sequence if you want, or do you want to go on with it now?
Actually, I think I wanted to ask Janice, how did Jim come to be not just your researcher extraordinaire, but also an author, a co-author on book 3? Did you invite him? Was it a big moment? Did you go down on one knee? Or did Jim say to you, I would really love to write in this world? How did that
happen? Well, Jim and I were both raised in Arizona. We married there. We moved to Utah and California, where we raised a family. I was a teacher. He was working as a civilian technician for project management of parts. And he always encouraged me to go back to writing, because I had enjoyed that before we were married. And he encouraged me. He created a little office for me, and Dearware Awakening was the result. But I couldn't sell it, and it was a little bit ahead of its time in some ways. However, then the computer part was important, but it didn't answer the next call. So fast forward, both of us worked with writing. I wrote for grants for my classroom as a teacher. He wrote grants and such.
No, I didn't write grants.
Well, you wrote those.
I was a logistics specialist for the Air Force, a civilian, and I wrote a great deal of papers
and manuscripts
to request things. I wrote textbooks, taught classes.
Manuals, and then they actually taught the classes with the manuals. So in about 2013, 14, I was at a group of ladies, and they were talking about, oh, all the things that are happening today and different events. And I said, oh, well, I wrote a book about that. And this one woman said,
Back in the 70s.
yes, back in the, I covered all that. And she says, well, why don't you get it out again? And so I did. And as the result, it started with The Dear We're Awakening. I consulted an editor. We refurbished it. Jim did all the research. How do we upgrade the computer from the 70s to the sentient being that is Keeper? And we did that, and he is always supporting. And then my gosh, there was some stuff left over. I got to tell the next story. So I'm going to write Adrian's Passage, and I did. And we still had a whole bunch of leftovers, and so we tried to work together. Now, that was the first time we actually worked together, where we were both...
It was an interesting experience.
After 56 years of marriage, I didn't know you thought that way.
Oh, yeah.
And talk to me about your process. Jim, would you write one story and then Janice, you would write the next story? Is it because book 3 is more of a collection.
Yes.
It's not like a
Yes.
novel where each of you took a chapter.
Book 3 is all the little stories that were left out of these two, and others that never even there's one about the backpack.
Yes,
Yeah. There's
pregnancy
one in there
backpack.
about the pregnancy backpack. The up here in Dear We're Awakening, it begins talking about the horrible pandemic. It's not the one we're in now.
Right.
It's worse.
Yeah.
And actually, it destroys the civilization practically. But they crawl out of that. And the big change is that this one with the bald head here in the middle, it's a uniale. It's not a transsexual. It's part male and part female. It's an artificial construct that this society created.
An amalgam.
Yes,
mixture.
it's an amalgam of men and women. All the races, everything all funneled into this perfect creature. Well, it doesn't turn out that way in the end. The uniales, actually, the males and the females in this book are rather pointless. They're really not needed. The uniales have all the children, the uniales do all the work, and the people have makeshift work that they do, they pretend, but it's not really serious.
Yeah.
They're not really necessary.
They've lost some meaning.
Yes, and the uniales have filled in and taken over everything that actually is necessary.
Yeah.
The childbirth, the work, everything that goes with all that. So that all occurs here, and then there's uniales get tired of this. And there's the big computer.
Don't give the story away.
Okay.
We wanted to read the book.
Yes, I know.
Don't,
I know.
okay.
I love this story.
Which I think is so important. I mean, I always say when we have a intellectual property and we're going to open it up for team writing, I always say I want to find people that already love this world. You know, I don't want to find people that you have to convince to love the world. I want people that are like, oh, just chomping at that bit, like, oh, I want to be there, I want to play there.
It's interesting because this thing's bounced around in our house for
Yes.
since the 1970s, and it would be put away, and then we'd get it out, and we'd put it away, and we'd get it out, and both of us together, we both thought this has got promise.
Yeah.
This has got someplace to go, and as we thought more about it, and we each contributed our own pieces to that. Now, what are you laughing at?
When
I'm
we
shy.
met over 50 years ago, he told me how quiet he was.
Yeah.
I just want you to
I
know
was.
he was quiet then. And so this is
She
what's happened.
changed me.
You know, the thing is, and again, I think this is such a huge blessing, is that the shyest people in the world will almost always have one or two things that they truly, truly love. And that's right. There we go. And I mean, we can end this by saying Janice, or we can end this by saying Dear Rare Codex. But clearly, both Janice and this seed, this idea, this world, is something that you feel very passionately about.
Oh, yeah.
And I always say the shyest people, they're the ones that are going to be the most verbose about something that they truly love.
This idea, all of this,
Yes.
has been with us since the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
She actually got the book finished in '78, I think it was. But, and then it didn't go. And then it just simmered for a while. And
Because you truly were, and I mean, the three of us have talked about this. We talked about this the very first time we ever sat down together. You truly were ahead of your time. Some people say that about their work, you know, and I'm like, no, it wasn't very well written. I think people would have been willing to address X, Y, or Z in society at that time. But in terms of the late 70s, the mid to late 70s, and really deconstructing and reconstructing gender roles in society, I don't think American publishers, maybe American readers were, but American publishers, they weren't quite ready. Because we talked about authors getting blacklisted where they would get a book through, but it would push the limits too far and it would get slammed, just critically torn apart. Sales would be abysmal. They wouldn't publish again for years. But now, I love the fact that we have come back around and who was it, a writers group, or you said you were with a group of women and they just said, why don't you bring that back out?
No, this was just a
group of
friendly
friends.
group of had a coffee klatch. I did do some writing with a group,
Yeah.
and they were not science fiction people, and they weren't sure what I was doing either.
Yeah.
And so by being in the science fiction genre, I was already kind of edging on the side.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a time when women in science fiction and fantasy were still almost always writing with initials so that their name would be free from gender, because women didn't write science fiction, right? I mean, that was, my goodness, that's ridiculous.
they did, and a few of us knew it.
Right,
but-
yes, right? Now, if someone said, I'm going to dive into the Dearware Codex, what is Dearware Codex 101? Just going in, what should people know what do you guys think people should know before they open a book?
It takes place in the 21st century, and the civilization is coming back, recovering from a major pandemic. And one of the ways they have recovered is they have genetically created the uniale, not a mixture, not a cross-gender, cross anything. It is a unique human being with their own personal pronouns. Ni did it. Nem, they gave it to Nem. Nez, that was Nez coat. And they are real human beings.
Right.
They aren't.
They're complete.
Right.
And as a complete amalgam, they can do just about anything, and they do.
What I love about that is that there is more, at least from my perspective as a reader, there is more to Dearware Codex than just this exploration of a third gender.
Yes.
I mean, there's so much more. I mean, Jim, I love the fact that, you first said, well, I worked with Janice as her researcher, going into all of these quantum computing, because we're also talking about AI and we're talking about those kind of constructs. But I love that when I say, what's the one thing someone should know, the uniales are what you bring up. Because they certainly make the book stand out. Because we see lots of science fiction that explores AI right now and machine learning. And we do see more science fiction now that explores gender and different gender presentations and different gender, even within alien races and this kind of stuff. We do see those, but you rarely see those things explored together. And personally, I think they go hand in hand.
Yes, we do too.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Was it a very conscious thing that you wanted to talk about AI and machine learning and gender?
The
Why
whole
that
fact of the
mix?
uniales was a way of expressing the human side of humans.
Yeah.
So often, and especially right now, we have all this conflict. And I felt that the uniale, united, uniform, the uniale was a way of expressing this coming together, this importance of helping each other, of working towards each other. And this comes through in some of the incidents. It comes through when the uniales go to visit a nursery. It goes through when the uniales visit an old age compound. how they care for each other is the unifying code. And that's what I came with. But then I had to explain, well, okay, how did we get to this point? And that was exploring genetics and some of the genetic possibilities. That was explaining and going to the research in AI. It was going into all of these other patterns developed because I wanted to form a uniform human being.
Yes. And you needed the science and the technology to support
Yes.
a realistic creation. Okay, see, that's wonderful. I'm not trying to disparage authors that come and they speak and they say, it was just a stroke of genius, it was just an inspiration, I just decided to throw things together. But I love a planned and purposeful and very considerate inclusion of what other people might see as disparate parts. And I'm like, no, that is a connection. There has to be that technological foundation for this to feel like something other than, and then a miracle occurred.
Yeah.
And we had the yay! I'm like, oh.
That was one of the problems when she wrote the book the first time. It wasn't as cohesive as it should have been. And we've always felt that's part of the reason she didn't get published.
And the reasons you stated.
And there,
That's very
there were
fair,
many,
though. That's very honest of you guys to say.
But, and so in when she started it up again, at first it was just her idea to start it up.
Yeah.
I encouraged her because she's more exciting when she's doing this.
She's a very exciting person.
I know it, but she's even better when she's doing something like this. You wouldn't believe it.
That's fair. That's very fair, though. When we're doing something we love, I think it's nicer to be around us.
Yes.
I know when I'm writing on something personal, my own writing project, not a work project, I'm nicer to be around.
We've noticed that.
Okay. So now I feel more comfortable because I understand now that this was a very deliberate connection. Because I'm like, I don't want to just talk about AI and machine learning, and if really what you guys want to only focus on is just a third gender and this idea of gender imbalance and finding balance. But right now in the world, AI, machine learning, it's almost every day there's some new headline. CRISPR, cancers caused by CRISPR manipulation. I watch the stock market just CRISPR alone. Oh, this is found by this scientist. This is reported by this, and just watching it is fascinating. In terms of Dear Ware Codex, do you feel like? Well, first of all, I should ask: do you intend for there to be another book?
Well, we hadn't originally.
But we've been talking about one.
And then my follow-up, well, fantastic. I hope there is. Do you feel like there's going to be another refresh to the technology?
With the technology, you mentioned the word learning.
Yes.
But with the technology changing as quickly as it is, it's always relearning. We don't learn anything. We have to keep relearning as we go along.
I love that.
And so I was a teacher for all those years too. And I think that I said it in Dearware. What page did I say that on?
I don't remember the
I don't
specific
remember the
page.
specific page. But the time that there is a point where technology alone is not enough, and you have to rely on the human desire to be part of each other, to
Better
survive,
themselves.
and to survive. There is a matter of survival, and technology doesn't always answer that. Sometimes technology gets in the way.
Absolutely.
So that is
Actually,
Adrian's passage.
that theme runs through all of them. That things are not working the way we think they should. Let's change it. There's a revolution in this book, and there's things like that in this book. This one's not so much because it's a collection of little stories that
Right.
didn't fit in these other two, or we hadn't thought of them when we wrote the other two, when she wrote the other two. I don't want to steal anything.
No, but I actually, to be honest, I'm not getting that Janice minds, Jim, first of all. But also, I love that you have this sense of ownership of the series. I mean,
I really do.
I think that's a wonderful thing.
It's not just me taking it over or anything. It's hers, but I love it, and I want to be part of it.
Yes.
And I have some ideas that'll fit in places.
Yeah.
And
get
book
into
4.
that in book 4. Yeah.
You're the original super fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I love that. I mean, don't all authors want the one? Yeah, I mean, come on, Janice. We know. All of us want secretly at least one super fan, and for that super fan to also be your significant other,
yes.
your soulmate. That doesn't get better than that.
We've been together since high school, and that was a long time ago.
Time ago.
A little bit, just a little.
And that's another exciting thing about this is that coming to the story and publishing and being able to be involved in situations like this has come at a later time of our lives when it's really important to us to keep active, to keep involved.
Yes.
And
We see friends, people our age, falling by the wayside in the world.
Yeah.
They drop out. They don't try anymore. They give up. Well, we're not giving up.
No, please don't give up.
And it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because this is too important.
I agree.
And there's other things that are even more important than that we don't write about.
Well, sure. You can only do so
Yes.
much. You can't change
Yes.
the whole world.
Right.
This
I only know
is,
so many words.
I think this is a fantastic legacy. And if anything, I like to have something to read. So it's awfully nice to have you guys in the world creating stuff that I actually want to read, because that category is getting narrower and narrower as I'm.
I find the same thing.
And that makes me. And people say, well, is it that you just don't like, newfangled science fiction? I'm like, no. It's that there's such a massive glut. There is so much content created. I find it next to impossible to find someone new. I go through so many authors, a lot of them self-published, because I want to give everybody a fair chance. And I'm looking for those gems that are well-written, well-edited, that are engaging. People say, oh, it's all the same stories over and over again. I'm like, stop. I don't want to hear that. I think I've heard that 4 or 5 times just in this season of Speak. And I always say the archetypes are told over and over again. But the way you construct that story,
The characters.
yes,
Their
the human
personalities.
emotion, those emotional beats, everything, that is what I'm looking for. That's why I come back to stories. And I love the Dearware Codex because, and I'm going to use this word on purpose, you guys marry themes that, like I said before, are not often seen married, but also you make it seem natural. Of course we're talking about AI. Of course we're talking about gender balance. Of course we're talking about technology. And Janice, I love in this day and age, is technology really helping? We've seen the echo chamber that social media becomes. And we have seen what comes of that. However people see January 6th in America, whether folks see it as a rally that got out of control or an insurrection, however it is seen by whatever American, it is very clear that it was fueled by social media platforms. This is how people organize. This is how information, whether false information or authentic information, is disseminated. This is how the distribution of information occurs.
And the amazing thing is how much hateful misinformation.
Yes.
This whole thing has gotten so amazing that every tiny little issue is all of a sudden full of hate.
Yes.
Now, they have not attacked ice cream cones yet, but I don't
They
know.
will.
Maybe
might.
today, Janice.
Maybe
It
today.
might be today.
Oh.
They're pointy. They
Yeah.
should come with trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Now, I have to. I love that you brought up uni. And I always want to say to people, remember that UNI, that little prefix, is also in united, and wouldn't it be fantastic if we could be a little bit more cognizant of being the United States? I mean, I thought it was...
We used to be. It
Yeah.
seemed to me.
And I mean, it's even on this first season of Speak, I'm like, these are folks that don't all vote the same. This is what Blue Legacy does, is we bring all different storytellers together. And even though we have very liberal artisans that appeared on this first season, and we have very conservative artisans who appear on this season, everyone gets along and everyone respects each other's opinion. We can all do events together. No, we may not all be buddies on social media. Oh, isn't that interesting? But we're buddy face to face. And that's why I love, Janice, that you have the courage to say technology is not always... Sometimes technology is the enemy. It is not always the savior. So, that being the case, on Speak, we ask every season the same industry questions of all of our artisans. I don't see it as any right or wrong question. I just want to hear everyone's opinion. And the first issue that I wanted to ask you guys about today is online stores versus bricks and mortar stores. Now, the reason I call them bricks and mortar stores and not real world stores is I always do like to gently point out they're all real world. The internet is the real world.
Yes, it is.
I always, anytime I can remind people of that, what we do on the internet, what we say on the internet, how we shop on the internet impacts the real world. What do you guys see about this issue? Do you think online stores are killing bricks and mortar stores? But more importantly, when you go to buy a book to read, where do you go?
First answer is I go to a book sale at one of the malls or on a parking lot or somewhere else, and I look at the authors that I know who are there and are writing books, and I take those books first. And then I look at the other kinds of things that come online, and there's, as the statement was, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books. But the little bookstore, if it can make the transition, becomes the third place for an ad, and it becomes the same place that used to be a coffee shop or a pub or a library or some other gathering place. Because one of the things I think that's found to happen during this COVID separation, people are longing to be back together. They're longing to meet back at the park, and if we can meet at a table where it's outside and we can both wear masks, we can talk. And that whole need to get together to read a book. But there is a transition, and that has to depend on the business sense of the person who has the little bookstore. We know they keep coming out, they send out many flyers to tell you what books are readable, which books are in their store. But I think it's that getting together over a cup of coffee or at the local pub or somewhere else to talk about these books. I talk about books with my friends that I am on the phone. They don't live near here. They're far away in California and other places. But we talk about books together because that's part of it, is that talking about the book you like.
Absolutely. I mean, people talk about word of mouth too as the most powerful form of advertising. You could spend millions of dollars, but the amount that you will spend to gain one reader, there is no comparison to simply someone saying, "I read this book, Susan. It is fantastic. It reminded me of back when we went to Barbados and you saw that, or whatever it was." I love that point. You bring up a very good point, is that is one thing the online stores cannot give us. They may be able to give us a larger selection, but they can't give us the let's sit down and chat.
They can't give a personal touch.
That's right.
They just don't.
Yeah.
They don't have that capability
yet. And the second industry question that I've been asking people to weigh in on is what you just touched on, Janice, which is every year in America alone, 600,000, so over 500,000 books, and specifically novels, are published now either by corporate presses, independent presses, art houses, or self-published, all of that, together. But how does an author distinguish themselves when that kind of content, that mass amount of content is coming out every year? And I also like to ask people, and I don't know if there is an answer to this. Some of the artisans this season have literally said there is no answer to that. And that is, what is the solution? How can we discover more new voices when there's so many thrown at us every year?
One of the things I've been relieved is in all this volume of material,
Yeah.
there's no one who writes about a uniale and uses my preferred pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
They're the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But going and trying to do the marketing, someone else, one of our friends said, writing is easy, marketing is hard.
Absolutely.
And it is a wall of trying to do things.
Yeah.
Writing is fun. Marketing is not. At least for me.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of authors would
feel
agree.
that way.
Yeah. I very early on, I was very blessed because the publisher that I worked with, they had a publicist that they assigned to me, and she said, "You are not gonna like." Her name was Janet, and I really, very, very, very much appreciated her. But she said, "You are not gonna like any of this. You just aren't." And I'm telling you right now, you can either decide to do what I tell you to do and not like it and sell a whole bunch of books. Or you can say, "No thank you, Janet," and you can sell no books at all. And I kind of always thought she was being dramatic, but I think there was probably one time in 2 years that I was contracted by that press and was bought and sold, by that press. I think there was one time that I said, I don't really feel comfortable doing that. And she's right, I sold no books that day. None. And it was a packed venue. But you're absolutely right. It is a completely different beast. I always say when I have a marketing day for my own work, even if I'm just going to be at my computer, I dress a different way. I have a little hat that I wear because I'm like, this is not Jennifer the writer. This is certainly not Jennifer the mom or the wife or the friend or the publisher or anything. This is Jennifer the publicist, and none of this is stuff I like, but I do know why it's important. And it's
Writers live in caves. And they have to put on that bear skin and venture outside in order to make a living.
I think that's
But
right.
when we're in that cave,
And it's a warm cave.
it's a good place.
It's a good cave. It's a luxury cave. You guys are the only authors, when I mentioned that I was going to have people read, you were the only ones that said, 1 page? You've got to be kidding me. And I want to just say thank you, because that was really nice. It was really nice to just have someone say, "Well, Jennifer, I'm willing to read for 35 minutes, and I'll read the whole first chapter," or I can absolutely. But to be like, 1 page? Are you insane, woman? Do you have a fever? Does someone need to check you? Are you all right? So
We have a whole
appreciate
list of all
Yeah.
the readings we could do.
I like that.
We appreciated why you told us to just read 1 page.
Yes.
Didn't like it. True.
Right, but
you're the
right?
boss in this case. You are. You're the expert. We don't know what we're doing.
But see,
But that's it. You are our go-to person. Okay, here's my book. I want to read all this book. I love this book. I want to share it with people. And you say, no, read just 1 page. Why? It's tantalizing.
yes.
Pick a
Yes.
page that is tantalizing.
Yes.
Not something boring, but we appreciate why you asked us to do it that way.
I think that, now see, personally, I have never walked into a bookstore, picked up a book, and randomly read a page in it. But I am being told over and over and over again that people do that. Now, I will look at the cover, because I'm sorry, when people say covers don't sell a book,
Yeah, yes, they do.
Yes, they do. I will look at the cover, I'll read the back of the book, and if I'm intrigued, I will then crack open the book and read the first few pages. But from a publicist perspective, and it was Janet who originally said that to me, wide-eyed 19-year-old Jennifer, and she said, you need to have one page. That's your bite. That's your hook. That's your readers are going to go, whoa, I need more of that. They don't need to understand everything in that page. But then, interestingly enough, so that's way back, like you guys say, back in high school. That's, 30 years ago. So, but we see it today, don't we? At Amazon. What's that feature? Look inside the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
and they select the pages.
That's right. And yes, since it's random, I think it's, they give you like the first 3 pages and then like page 10 or something like that. Yeah, there could be spoilers on that page, but people like that feature. Once it popped up, boy, oh boy, it didn't ever go away. And other places now try to emulate that, even if it's, you have to click here and download this and do. It is a thing. So you guys did finally decide what you were going to read. Are you both going to read? Are you going to read from 2 different books? What are you going to do?
Well, how much time are you going to give us to do this?
The
right.
Bargaining begins.
The bargaining begins. We timed ourselves.
I can only read from this book because that's the only one I actually
That's fair. That's fair.
I wrote 4 stories in there, and I can read a little bit of each one of them. Just a page.
That was hard because when you publish the book, sometimes they start. The first chapter is on a half a page.
Yes.
So, how to count that out? Well,
And
how many words does it have?
I will tell you roughly what I've been doing with artisans, just to be fair, is the equivalent of a page. So I will admit, I do believe it was your son.
That guy.
I had the great honor of interviewing Janice and Jim's son, David Mecklenburg, on another episode of Speak. Now, I may be wrong, but right now, off the top of my head, I believe that David did this, where he read basically half a page from one area and then half a page from another. But if I'm wrong, go and watch the full interview of Speak with David Mecklenburg and call me out. I would be more than willing to have each of you read a page, or the equivalent of a page, if you guys are open to that.
Fine.
Before we do the reading, because I usually end Speak with the readings, is there anything else that you guys specifically want to talk about Dear Ware Codex?
It's your book.
Oh boy, he just passes it off to you when it gets hard. I see. That's how those co-authors work.
Told you I like the fun parts.
That's right, yeah.
When we created the question, we talked about it a number of times, and we were going to ask you as a publisher. Now, you've crossed over the line from an author to a publisher and marketer. How do you decide in your determination to be all-inclusive?
Yeah.
How do you determine what's really great all-inclusive and what's really poor all-inclusive?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I should answer that here, though, since I'm not being interviewed. You might have to save it for fair play.
Okay.
But that's a really legitimate question. And also, for me, actually, one of the biggest things, Janice, is how do I separate the artist from the art? That more than anything else is that if someone's work, I'm reading that at face value and saying, wow, this is definitely inclusive. Everybody is treated the same. There's bad guys of all shapes, sizes, colors, nationality, whatever. This is breaking some stereotypes, but it's really speaking to formula fiction, action adventure readers, or whatever it is. And I'm like, wow, I think formula fiction, action adventure readers need a little inclusiveness in their lives. But then maybe I go, like any good publisher does nowadays, and I research that person online. I see what their social media presence is. I see the way they speak to other people in the real world, and I go, ooh, That's
Real
not
quick,
quite as good.
That's the question or
Yeah.
statement I would make about this, is that it's one thing to think about these things
Yes.
and talk about them over the breakfast table and you talk about ideas.
Yeah.
But when you actually start coming down to writing it, it is very different, because if you are going to perform, whether it's in front of an audience, in a theater, if it's a classroom of students, if it's a group of managers who you have to give a seminar with, when you're talking in person and you're discussing this,
Yeah.
you get audience feedback immediate. You know if they're bored, they're not listening, they're making, they're intent, they're asking questions. You have immediate feedback.
Yes.
When you're writing this book, you are creating this world that is very true to you, but you have no idea where it's going to go, who is going to read it, what time of their life they're going to read it, what time of the day are they going to read it, and where are they going to read it?
Yeah.
Are they going to read it on an airplane when they're going to their parents' funeral? Are they going to read it to a classroom? Where are they going to read it? And that big difference of trying to measure how you write something when you have no knowledge of what the audience will do.
Yeah. When you're in your cave.
And you're in your cave. And that was something that even we discussed quite a bit this time. You're not writing this for yourself. If you're going to put this book out and expect people to enjoy it
Right.
and read it, how do you create it for them when you have no idea who they are?
Or what they like.
And you know what I think the ultimate answer is to that? You don't.
You don't. You just wing it.
But
And
I think good writers ask that question. They think about, I think about years after I'm gone, I think about someone picking up my work. And people say, oh yeah, you think about your kids picking up. I'm like, no, I think about anyone picking up my work. How will it be seen then? You know, these issues that meant so much to me, how will they be perceived 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Will they come across as completely dated, or will they still have the emotional impact that I would hope they would have? And I think ultimately, we do. We have to just say, this is me on the page. Me might not be you. Me might not be him or her or all of us, but at least it's me, and that's what I have to give. That's all I have to give. But I love that you guys think about that, and that you talk about it, and that you consider it, because I think that's part of the editing process, isn't it? I mean, before it goes to an editor, part of our internal editing process.
Yes.
I always say to, like your guys' son, my son is also an author, and we often talk about writing. And he said, what is your process one day? He's like, I see you, but what is your... I said, well, I have an 8-step process. So my book has actually been edited. Of those 8 steps, 4 of those times are extensive editing that I'm doing before my editor ever sees it. But I was raised that this would be my career from a very early age. And so how can I shape my work the best I possibly can so that I have the most control putting myself on the page as I possibly can? So I love that you guys think about those things, and I love that you consider those readers that are out there, and I think it shows. Because I think you speak to a wider audience than one might assume. And I think that's vital. I think what worked against you in the 70s works for you now, is that you are willing to explore issues that are delicate.
Yeah, there are ideas we wouldn't have even thought of in the 70s.
Yes.
Where now we can discuss them
quite
easily.
openly, yeah. I think that gender is a very hot button topic, and I think that technology is a very hot button topic. And again, combining those two, I just think is absolute brilliance. I hope I'm embarrassing David, that I keep bringing him up like this, because I like embarrassing David. David.
So do we.
See, there we go. It's a parent thing, I think. Okay. David mentioned Deo Collectrum. It's his biggest collection. I called it a tome, I believe, but I said it's a tome of perfect bites. And he said, the great thing about Deo Collectrum is that it's a made-up word, Jennifer. I said, no, it isn't. He said, yes, it is. So when you Google Deo Collectrum, it's the first thing that comes. It's the only thing that comes up.
The only thing that comes up.
Uniales.
It sounds.
Right, it sounds
and
like
so
does Uniale. Have you guys ever Googled Uniale?
So far, I haven't found anything with uniales. They have different. They have it included in other context or other long-term words, and
Yes.
uni comes up. If that always shows up.
But not uniale.
No.
See?
Not,
And that's been there from the original, and
Yes.
the pronouns, because they were important to make this a real human being.
I think the fourth book should have the word Uniale in the title. I mean, I just think there you go.
Oh,
Uniale Rising.
oh,
thank you.
thank you. Right? I need to write that down.
Can we stop this? I've been sitting
I just finished a collection called Sabbath Rising, and I thought to myself, what a fascinating word that word is, rising. It's kind of like the fall of, when people say, the fall of night, the fall of, what, and I'm like, oh, those are such simple words, aren't they? Rise and fall, but they mean so much. There's that emotional resonance that I think exists in those two words. But you know what? Enough about words. I want to hear just your guys' words. Who would like to read first?
Oh,
You want to start?
well, I have to find it. Well, we spent a lot of time going over
Spent a lot
your
of
work.
time practicing.
Okay.
All right, so Janice, you're reading from Adrian's Passage, which is book 2.
Yeah, book 2.
Okay.
And it begins with Mix, that's the dog, got into a skunk, Slade said as he grabbed the dog by the scruff of the neck. He just wants to share with you. He held a rag over his mouth and nose, but there was laughter in his voice. We're lucky the skunk spray did not get aimed into his eyes, or we'd have a sick animal on our hands. Instead, he's making us all sick, Dinam yelled out. Get him away from here. We'll go. Remember, he wanted to share. He coaxed the dog down the worn path toward the stream. Oh, Mix, you're disgusting, he said to his companion. Mix was not offended, and he just wagged his tail. Oh, Slade, the smell was awful. There have been whiffs of skunk before, but not like that. There was a chemical quality, and it was so strong. Now, in fresher air, Theta could smile at the turmoil Mix had caused. He's still pretty bad, isn't he? Yes, he is happy about it, but I do not know how to get him clean. Oh, we can try, Theta said. The others don't want to go back in that smelly cave, so they probably won't want to travel with him. Let's take him to the other pool away from here. We can wash him with sand. It wasn't far, and they pulled the dog into the pool to scrub him. The dog shook himself, and soon they were all three, wet and splashing, dunking the dog, dunking one another. Laughter was woven between touches and awareness of being so close. When Theta tried to dunk Nim once more, Slade took her hand for a moment, then gently pulled her to Nim. Niz's embrace was not in fun, and Theta returned the touch. They never took their eyes from each other until, moving closer, Slade touched her cheek with his own. Ni moved so gently their faces nuzzled each other's, then hesitatingly kissed her lips. A tiny pause, anticipation. Theta eagerly sought Nez's kiss again. Holding each other in the coolness of the morning, it was all as it should be, just the sweetness they desired. They did not see Noral watching from the path. Noral could not react. Ni didn't know how. Ni had followed them with his crutch to tell them their compeers wanted to leave the cave. Seeing their embrace, Noral trembled inside. Too many emotions, too many obstacles, too much confusion. When their tenderness initiated passion, Ni turned away, embarrassed, and limped back up the path.
To me, that is a perfect selection because it is completely accessible to any reader.
Thank you.
We have all been there with that dirty little dog.
Stinking dog.
Stinky little, how many times turn to Noodle and I'll say to her, Noodle, what did you roll in? My darling beast, why do you smell like death? And that idea of going about an everyday task and those moments of tenderness that come from nowhere they don't come from nowhere, but that come out of nowhere when you care about someone, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be doing the dishes, you could be washing a stinky dog. And that's, I think, what I love. And then the rise in the story toward that apex of emotion of being seen, not knowing you're being seen, and then someone else saying it's hard to see.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most of us have been in that position as well. So thank you, Janice. I think that was a great choice.
Good.
Jim, you are going to jump around a little bit.
Well, I'm going to.
In book 3.
This is book 3. Whoops.
Very well prepared. Lots of
Yes,
notes.
Lots of notes.
I like this, you guys.
I've memorized them. Anyway, book 3, Ever Aquam, and it's a collection of short stories, and the one I'm going to read from is What's Love Got to Do with Quantum Computing?
Very good question.
Yes, it is. Let me find my spot here. Molly had been aware of my music studies, of course, but had made no comments about it. I signaled her I needed to communicate. We need to listen to some music together, as a couple. I think it's very important for both of us. As Molly and I listened to Shostakovich, we exchanged opinions about the structure of the symphony and the beauty of each note. We experienced emotions never before felt as the various instruments of the orchestra each contributed their unique, beautiful parts to the body of music. In the past, I had considered music to be muddy and confused, but in sharing it with Molly and experiencing it together in our shared quantum reality, a clarity descended upon us both, and new, exciting feelings bubbled up in us to be savored and enjoyed. The largo tempo of the music was agonizing at times, and had I been human, I would have cried. Molly said the instruments were crying, each in their own unique way. I had not thought of it that way. But she was right. They were weeping, and soon so were we.
I'm so glad to hear, Jim, that you also like to embarrass David. It means so much to me. I feel like it's a connection that we share. I feel it very deeply. And it's because he's brilliant. That's really what it is.
He's smarter than we are.
Yes, come on. Let's just hands down. That's the given.
I'm a little smart, Jan's a little smart, and the kid got it all.
Yeah, right? It's genetics. Janice, it's genetics. It's the wonder of genetics. Like how Max and Faith are taller than me. How did that happen? It's genetics. It's a wonderful thing. All right. When I was speaking to David, one of the things that kept coming up is that so much of his work marries music, art, and prose. I love that you selected a piece. So this is prose talking about music. I have sat in writers groups where there was, like a guide, the older, more experienced writer who likes to hold court a little bit, And I had someone say, there are 2 things you never write about in writing. You want good writing. Never try to write about music, and never try to write about film, because that's a visual medium and an auditory medium, and they cannot be expressed in prose. I could not disagree more.
That's a narrow mind.
And sad.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, how sad. All the wonderful prose you're never going to read. So I love how you just took this piece, and again, there's emotion here. There's very deep emotion.
There is.
There's connection, which both of your pieces talked about connection between people who love each other, are striving for a deeper connection, actually, in some ways, both of those pieces. But also that music can be described, and music does have a home within prose. Music does exist between the lines on the page. I mean, I feel like you can almost hear that. We're there. Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Yes, absolutely. I know what you're saying. Or rather, I know what I'm hearing, I guess is the better way to say it. So thank you. I think that was an excellent selection. You guys did great. I thought you were going to be so nervous.
Oh, we are.
But you're hiding it very, very well.
Very well, yes.
You're each other's strength.
We're both good actors. We both had a lot of training in acting.
Did you do acting in school?
Yeah, I was a business major, but I have 50 semester hours of speech and drama.
I dragged him over to the drama department where I was.
Best thing I ever had. When I was
Janice is what it sounds
well,
like.
yes.
But I mean, okay, yeah, sorry.
As far as the training is concerned, when I worked for the Air Force,
Yeah.
I was always being called on to give briefings and things to, a whole bunch of colonels get in this room and they want to know about whatever it is. And
Yeah.
they picked me to go in there and talk to them because I did it so well. Well, it was the speech and drama. I was putting on an act.
Yes.
I didn't believe that stuff.
Speech and drama, a background in speech and drama will help with marketing also.
Oh, definitely.
Because, and we have had some artisans this season on Speak talk about, Carrie Avery Moriarty talked about it. She said, this today is Carrie Avery Moriarty, the author. This is not Carrie the person. Yes, Carrie the person, there's parts of her in here, but this is my persona. This is what I wear when I'm doing things like this. And it wasn't just about the clothing, though she was dressed, very particularly. It was about a full body presentation. And I think acting really does help with that. Thank you both so much. Janice, thank you. Jim, thank you so much for being here with me on Speak. Absolutely. Dearware Codex. They are fantastic. You can find them at blueforgepress.com, on amazon.com, or you can go into any bookstore and special order them. They are absolutely worth a read, 2 reads, 3 reads. They deserve a place in your home library. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Constructs. We hear this word a lot. It's what society creates around an issue. At least that's how I always defined it. The packaging, sometimes messy, sometimes elegant, that we wrap around things like gender roles, and AI. When a lot of us hear AI, we think of almost omnipotent machines, computers that will make all of our decisions for us. And while this still seems quite a bit like science fiction, when you're trying to get Alexa or Siri to answer a simple question like, what's the weather like on Friday? Algorithms are AI, and we all know that dirty little word that should probably be 4 letters. Algorithms are what decides what we see and how much of it, and they often become an echo chamber, amplifying the same news or the same false news and false narratives over and over again, depending on what gets us to click, what gets us to engage. Will a world be safer if we're free or more free from constructs that are wrapped around things like gender and AI? If we explore these issues more and dive deeper, will we be more educated and so more equipped to move forward and maintain superiority over machines? Do we still have it? Do we want it? These are some of the issues that a lot of folks think only Gen Z is tackling. Maybe some of us brave Gen Xers, and certainly some millennial scientists, but actually greatest Gen and boomers are also exploring these themes, gender roles, that some would argue were more oppressive during their growing up. Don't judge an author by their genre. Don't judge an author by their age. Judge an author by the story they want to tell. Thank you for joining us today for Speak. Speak is brought to you by the 501c3 nonprofit Blue Legacy and made possible in part by grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Washington Arts Commission. If you'd like to be a guest on Speak, or you have a question you'd like us to ask our guests in future episodes, please write to us at blueforgefilms@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.